All right, let's get started then. So we're talking about origins, customs, holiday symbols, and I found some really neat stuff. I think you'll really like it. Okay, well, you might ask, what does it mean? And a lot of people, the big thing is turkey, and we'll get to a lot of turkey later, and holiday shopping. We'll get to that too. Now, it's come into question among historians about whether the Pilgrims had the first Thanksgiving. And actually, according to History.com, I read an article about it. Only one Pilgrim, Edward Winslow, recorded this. It supposedly lasted 3 days and hosted 150 people. He did say that there were fowl served. He didn't say whether they were turkeys or not. And possibly other things on the menu were lobster, seal, much of it prepared by Native American methods. One of the things that we would think would be there would be actually cakes and pies, but we're pretty sure they didn't have that because by the time they got to New England, the ship's stores on the Mayflower of flour and sugar were pretty much over with. They had all been consumed, and they had no oven either yet. So that's another thing we have to consider. So let's move on, but hey, now here's one of the things you may not have considered it, but a credible claim is made that St. Augustine, when they landed there on September 8th, 1565, they feasted with Native Americans, and that is the earliest date for some sort of Thanksgiving in this country. And also in Texas, near present-day El Paso, Don Juan de Oñate and settlers, they reached the banks. They also had Thanksgiving. And also in Berkeley Plantation in Virginia, and they also had a Thanksgiving celebration when they landed, and this is what they said. We ordain that the day of our ship's arrival at the place assigned for a plantation in the land of Virginia shall be yearly and perpetually kept holy as a day of thanksgiving to Almighty God. So the idea was already there. And we're perhaps wondering, why is there such a New England cast to this? Because as you see, the Pilgrims were really among the last people to actually get here. So how did they get this hold on Thanksgiving in American life? And this is basically my personal opinion based on things I've read, that the Puritans and Pilgrims believed implicitly that the Bible was the prime cornerstone of religious belief, and of course you had to know how to read it. And they literally produced and sent forth thousands of school teachers with the growing United States, and they literally set the agenda for much of education in America. And in my opinion, that's why New England is so closely associated with it. And also another thing is that they practice it more often. A lot of these other things like Florida were sort of occasional affairs, and they made it a real habit. And it was kept on and off throughout our colonial period. Finally, in 1789, George Washington appointed a general day of Thanksgiving, and he was the first president, as well as the first president general, but he was also the first president to set it as the fourth Thursday of November. And that's pretty much how it was done, but not always. Now, this is a sort of interesting piece. In the Civil War, President Lincoln was prevailed upon by a woman named Sarah Josepha Hale. She was the editor of Godey's Lady's Book, And she urged them to have a day of our annual Thanksgiving made a national and fixed union festival. And here is the lady herself. I call her the godmother of modern Thanksgiving. Her magazine was so popular with women that she had 150,000 circulation, which was a pretty good number for mid-19th century. And so she was in a perfect place to persuade the president to do this. And while she was at it, she also helped raise money for Vassar Women's College, and even found time to make sure that they raise funds for the Bunker Hill Monument, which you can see if you ever go to Boston. And she was really something. She was also the editor of Godey's book for 40 years. So she was a force to be reckoned with. And the holiday gradually spread, and this is actually an interesting picture because in the Civil War period, there was this group of private individuals called the U.S. Sanitary Commission, and what their aim was to raise money for medical supplies, personnel, field hospitals to help the Army Medical Corps treat Union soldiers who were injured or sickened in battle. And they had these big, massive fairs to raise money. And this was the hit of the City of New York's and the City of Brooklyn's Sanitary Commission fair. It was called the New England Kitchen. And volunteers dressed in colonial garb would serve New England style things like a boiled dinner and stuff like that. And it was a real wow. In fact, it's been credited as being New York City's first themed restaurant. So there. And I found this, it was an Army field Thanksgiving. And up here you see they have pies, cider, and the sutler. These were people who actually provided provisions for the Army. And they went from camp to camp with their wagons, their supplies, and they provided all this stuff. But there was an interesting thing here, and this has been done a long time. They still do it in some way or other. They still try to have Thanksgiving for our troops. And so anyway, what they did was from a book by Chris Ager. It was called From Guns.com. It's with the troops on Thanksgiving over the years. And this was a picture taken from that article. In fact, actually, there's a personal collection to it because in November of 1944, my father was a quartermaster sergeant, and he actually got written up in the 1st Division's actual history, division history, because he actually provided hot turkey sandwiches to them in the Hurtgen Forest. So there we go. Now, this was not something that actually worked very well for all Americans. And in the Southeast, this holiday was basically pretty much ignored by most people living there. And there were some reasons. For instance, before the Civil War and Reconstruction period, Southerners actually, their big holiday was Christmas and also New Year's. But they really didn't bother much, and few of them even knew very much about a New England style kind of dinner holiday. And what happened is that it really got to be, in a way, it was sort of one of America's first culture wars, especially in the post-Civil War years. A lot of people believed in the South, the sectional feelings were so bitter about the victorious North. They felt that New England values were being forced upon them. And it took some time to get actual acceptance of the holiday, and there were a couple of reasons why it happened. First of all, a lot of tensions and animosity eventually eased with the passage of time, and also a lot of Yankees started moving down to the South for the better weather, and Florida, of course, got a whole mess of them. And so they sort of introduced the holiday to their Southern friends, and it gradually got more acceptance. So especially by this period, the First World War, it seemed like a good time for Americans to gather together and be one people. And so basically, this is where we got to. Now, this was sort of interesting because traditionally, the president would issue a proclamation naming Thanksgiving as the fourth Thursday of the month. But in this case, President Roosevelt didn't do that. And he actually moved it to the 5th week of November. And as you see on the headline here, said, Roosevelt to move Thanksgiving, retailers for it, Plymouth is not. Said football schedule makers also get a headache with season set to end with 5th Thursday in November. So why did he do it? Well, he was approached by major retailers like Kresge, which is now Kmart, and Sears, which of course is still around, and other retailers to add an extra week of shopping for the Christmas season. And so he thought that it would help cash-strapped Americans who were mostly buying things on time. They had something then, which a few stores occasionally still do have, of layaway. You put down a certain amount of money and pay so much per week. And, you know, it seemed like a really good idea. But not always, and this was a great telegram I found from this restaurant in Alliance, Ohio, from Leota and Helen Kerr, and they said, congratulations on your re-election in 1940. When shall we serve our Thanksgiving turkey, 21st or 28th? And it was a real problem because 12 states, Florida among them, decided to hold it on the fourth Thursday. And you could have this tremendous thing, like for instance, New York celebrated on the 5th, but if you were going to school in Connecticut, which is only a few hours away by train, and wanted to join your family, they would actually have to have 2 Thanksgivings because you wouldn't be out of school on their day. It would be the following week. And of course, it threw all the stuff. I mean, travel schedules for trains and airlines, radio programming schedules, football schedules. It was just insanity. Finally, order was restored. In 1941, Congress, in a great burst of partisan cooperation, set the fourth Thursday date, and that's the way it's going to be from now on. Now, this is sort of interesting. One of the strange customs we have is, why does the president pardon a turkey? And it's been attributed to President Truman. However, the Truman Library actually refutes that. They said at various times, different presidents have been given turkeys by constituents and other groups for Thanksgiving in the White House. And it's, in fact, actually, there's a wonderful story that President Lincoln received a turkey, and his son Tad got so attached to it that he named it Jack, and he begged his father to spare him, and his father dutifully wrote out a pardon. And so Jack walked around the White House grounds with Tad as a pet. So that's where we are there. And of course, you know, this custom is ripe for satire, and these are some cartoons from the last 10 years or so. And said, what our leaders are doing this Thanksgiving, and they have a caricature of Obama. He says, I'm convening my economic team and urging Congress to pass a new recovery plan to meet the historic economic crisis head on. And they had President Bush saying, I'm pardoning a turkey. And here's President Trump said, my presidency and Thanksgiving are unconventional, and he's ready to sacrifice the media, which is the NBC Peacock, in case you haven't noticed, because he had a lot of problems various times with the media. Now, of course, I have no Biden cartoons because it hasn't happened yet. So that's why I'm using what we have. Okay, well, you know, not every turkey makes the cut for the pardon. And this is what happened in 1953. Swanson introduced the TV dinner. They had extra turkey, and they packed them into 5,000 aluminum trays and loads of peas and sweet potatoes. And there we have TV Thanksgiving. And also we have a new culinary tradition. And I was 4 years old when that was introduced. It was actually invented by a woman named Dorcas Riley, and she got into the Food Preparation Hall of Fame, believe it or not, for this. But it was a way for Campbell to sell its cream of mushroom soup for the holidays, and that's why it wound up being part of the Pantheon. And of course, here's one of the eternal questions. Is it stuffing or is it dressing? And normally you would think, logically, if it's prepared in the bird, it's stuffing. If it's baked by its own self, it's dressing. But it's never as easy as that. And in Butterball, according to their website, they had a survey, and they found that 15 states, 5 of them in the South, actually call it dressing. And that's always historically been what Southerners have said, oh, y'all call it stuffing, but we call it dressing. And apparently there seems to be some veracity to that. And cranberry sauce. You know, you can love it or you can hate it, but it's still going to be on the table. And everybody does something different. I actually do fresh cranberries. And they're actually, it's as easy as dirt to do this. It's actually on the package. So if you wanted to do something different, just get a package of fresh. But you have to ask, why is there fresh and why is there canned? And there is a good reason for it, because traditionally cranberries were grown dry and picked like other fruits off the bushes. And they still are. And those are the ones that wind up fresh. But the ones that wind up in cans, they are harvested wet. They are actually kept in bogs of water, and their natural buoyancy actually brings them to the surface, and they scoop them up. And you've seen in old movies those big wooden scoops, and they're wearing the waders and stuff like that. But here's what happened, though. They now are basically picked mechanically, and happened since the 1930s. But mechanical sort of brews the fruit a little, and so they're not allowed to sell them as fresh. So the obvious solution is can it. That's what they did. One of the eternal questions, is it pumpkin, apple, or sweet potato pie? Everyone has their adherents, and I know, I didn't have enough room for mince pie, so please forgive me. But anyway, I actually found this on Better Homes and Gardens and another site called Hungry Dudes. And they maintained that apple pies are not really a true Thanksgiving a dish, because the harvest season for apples are September and October. So basically they're sort of, you can't make a fresh apple pie because the apples are not fresh, so we rely on frozen. and or canned apple. So what they do say, though, are pumpkin. And now pumpkin pies are sort of interesting because the oldest American cookbook was produced by Emma Simmons in 1796 called American Cookery. And this is basically what our ancestors prepared their meals with. And this is what she described. It was actually described as a pumpkin pudding made with sugar and nutmeg and baked in a crust, which basically is a pumpkin pie. And now the last one, sweet potato pie, was also very interesting because in Africa, the natives actually ate a lot of yams. And when they were taken into slavery and brought to this country, didn't have the yams, but we did have sweet potatoes, and that was a good substitute. And so literally generations of African American cooks and families have produced this, and it still is a great favorite. It's not considered Thanksgiving in many African American households without doing that. And of course, we have to do football. And this is a 1928 ad cover for the Saturday Evening Post, and it shows a pilgrim and a football player. And so this has been part of the Thanksgiving scene for quite some time. And it's a big thing. People are either playing it on Thanksgiving, especially after they've eaten and need to run around the yard for a while. As you see in this picture, here the men are listening to a game on the radio while, a feast is being set. And of course, there's a lot of cartoons about this. I thought this was a cute one, having a turkey, a day to stuff my face and watch football. I mean, what can you do better than that? Now, another one we're going through is the Macys Parade. It's not Thanksgiving without the parade. And it originally started in 1924, so it's been around for a while. And it was sort of originally meant as the open to Christmas shopping season, be sort of more of a Christmas parade. But since it's held on Thanksgiving, it gradually got to be associated with the day. And this is from the 1934 parade, and that's actually a balloon of Mickey Mouse. And if he looks a little different, the early Mickeys had a much more rat-like appearance, which Disney, over the years, remedied and made him a little more sweet and fuzzy. And this is from the 1940 parade. I know because they have the great dictator on the marquee, so I know it's 1940. This is Times Square, New York, and they have this balloon of a hippo, and they actually would let them loose at the end of the parade. They'd go floating in the air because they were filled with helium, and they would drift wherever the winds took them. And if you found one, you would, the store would give you a $25 gift certificate, which is over $500 today. So you had a really good Christmas shopping season if you found it. But they had to stop it because it was a hazard to aircraft. And of course, by the 1940s, more and more planes were in the skies. In fact, actually, in New York City's case, they already had Newark, which is now Newark Liberty, just across the river in New Jersey. And LaGuardia in Queens was operating. So there were a lot of planes going on around, so they stopped doing that. Now, the parade has been interrupted, and they had no parade between 1942 and 1944 because they didn't have the personnel and they didn't have the materials. So they literally surrendered themselves to the war effort. And what they did is that This was a dragon balloon that they filled with air, and in great dramatic fashion, Mayor LaGuardia actually, plunged a knife into it to deflate it. And they did that to all of the balloons, and what they did is that it produced 650 pounds of rubber for the war effort. And this is what the ad copy from Macys said. They said, "We've enlisted." And this is what it said. It said, "We are turning ourselves over body and soul with no strings attached to the New York City Salvage Committee. Destined for the rubber scrap pile, we will perhaps find our way into tires for tanks or maybe life rafts wherever we're most needed." And that was supposed to be from the balloons themselves. Now, of course, after the war, everything resumed, and this is a popular New York thing. If you're ever there during that time, it's really sort of worth it to go to West 79th Street by the Museum of Natural History and watch the balloons being filled. I mean, I've done it once or twice. It's so much fun. Sometimes they even let you help. And Macys Parade actually wound up in the Miracle on 34th Street, and they actually filmed during the 1946 parade, which was not the first post-war parade. That was in 1945, but this is the 46 one. And actually, Edmund Gwenn did double duty. When you see him as Kris Kringle in the parade, he really was in the parade. They used him for the Santa Claus. And this is what Maureen O'Hara recorded. "It was a mad scramble to get all the shots we needed, and we got to do each scene only once because they were not interrupting the parade. They had to catch all of this on the fly and make it work." And now the Macys Parade started being broadcast on the radio, according to nyctourist.com, in 1932. And by 1948, it was televised for the first time. So gradually, this is what helped make it a thing in the United States. More and more people were starting to tune in and listen to it on the radio, and then gradually they started doing television. And this is, as you can see, NBC camera has one of the early parades, probably from the 1950s. And of course, they estimate about 40 million people tune in to actually see this parade on TV. It's really an international event now. Now, of course, these are the customs on Thanksgiving that nobody likes. And we have crowded airports, TSA inspections. Some people tried to beat the system by traveling earlier, like 3 days earlier, but apparently a whole bunch of people get the same idea at the same time, so that is not going to help you. And of course, we've had to deal with COVID, and actually, to its credit, the Macys Parade did not stop. They could have suspended the parade last year. They held the parade, and in order to make it all work, there were absolutely no spectators lining the sidewalks at all. It was just the parade, which was televised. That's how they did it. But a lot of people, they're having smaller gatherings, vaccinated Thanksgivings, and trying to make it work. Of course, we have crowded roads. According to AAA, they say 47.8 million people take to the roads on Thanksgiving. So that's quite a few people there. And of course, Black Friday. I mean, the deals are good, but I mean, people have literally been maimed. I mean, broken arms, fist fights, you name it. I actually saw a video in this mad melee a couple of years. This young man got pushed into an empty bunch of shelving in a store and broke his hip. But the most important thing is just to get together and give thanks and just wish each other great happiness for the holiday and the new year. And I want to thank everyone because this is a great picture. I found this on a government website, National Archives. This lucky family in 1942 got all of their sons in the service for Thanksgiving, which, was very rare. So I want to thank everyone. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them, and I'll try to answer them. Thanks again.